We have one more session that we want to bring to you, and this is a conversation about pathways to global impact. And I'm going to ask our speakers to join us on stage. We're going to be joined by Moira Shourie and Himanshu Shah. Please come on up. Moira is the executive director of Zocalo Public Square and is a former journalist and an executive with MTV Network. She helped found Outlook, the magazine that many of you know in India. And Himanshu is also here. Himanshu is the founder and executive chairman of the Marius Pharmaceuticals and Shah Capital. And he is very involved in a lot of philanthropy work around India and the world. Welcome, Moira and Himanshu.
Hi, everyone. I think if there's an empty seat next to you, you should go outside, grab someone's hand, and bring them back in. So Himanshu and I are here. We have a slightly different panel makeup than you probably saw in your agendas. And we've been wrapped, sitting here and listening to the amazing stories and the fantastic examples being set by leaders, Indian leaders from the Indian diaspora in the worlds of philanthropy. Now, all of these people found their success because they were ambitious and they took their dreams to other parts of the world. And they've been able to give back in the form of philanthropy to India and to the countries they now call home. Nothing Himanshu or I sitting up here can add to the amazing achievements of what everyone who has come before us in this room have been telling us about. So in true Indian style, we have adapted, right? So we've adapted what we would like to talk about today and talk a little bit about the underpinnings of the global political changes that we are finding ourselves in this moment, and what that means for us as a group, what that means for our philanthropic as well as our impact. Himanshu, you good with that?
Sure. Can you guys hear me in the back? Great. So just a brief background. I was born in India, in Ahmedabad. I moved to States when I was 20 or so. And, when I started Shah Capital 20-some years or so ago, our first motto was, give 5% of our net profit to charities from day one. And, so I started off as an investor and became like a strategic advisor to a lot of companies because we did a lot of activism. And now I've become like an operator as well because I run a few companies. So philanthropy, as we have heard so much in the last hour and a half, is kind of part and parcel of anyone who is at this stage, like most of us are in this room, or all of us are in this room. And, I could not concur more. The more you give, the better you feel.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And you of course have made your mark as an investor, and you have looked at problems in the private sector and come in with your money to solve those problems and to move the needle even further. We know that governments do have a mandate and the ability to make broad and deep social change. But as an investor, you see things very differently. You probably look at problem solving in a way that most other people don't. So for you, there are all these global changes happening. We now just know that Germany has had a big political shakeup. How do you see what's happening in the world around you? Your role as an investor and your role as a philanthropist.
First of all, I think the election on November 5th and the outcome of that is going to change the world. Pretty big, in a massive scale. Because what you're seeing over here in the US is kind of a US first. Most of the countries out of Asia and Europe and whatnot, they rely on the US market. And US wants to put a lot of tariffs and whatnot, and that has a huge impact on how business is going to be done going forward. I mean, our new president acts like Mao, like I'm the law. So in other words, anything can change tomorrow or day after. And if you really think about it, that has a massive change in how you conduct your business. Now, he's not going to change, and he's going to be still in power for the next 4 years. So what, as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, or as a CEO, you really have to be on your toes on this front. And be truly pragmatic and dynamic, and you got to practice that every day. Because something is going to change over here. Going back to Germany that Moira talked about, I mean, again, you're seeing a movement across the globe to the right, i.e., most of the developed countries in Europe, in US, even Canada, Australia included most likely, they don't want immigrants. So a lot of Indians that are moving to these countries, that's going to stop at large, or quite a bit. Again, that has implications on India. We talked about remittance, it's $120 billion that helps the Indian current account deficit. People don't realize that how important diaspora is to the well-being of the Indian economy. But going back, that can also make India truly better again or great again. Because again, it's a self-reliance. Your economy or the model is not dependent on exports. So you got to have a very healthy, dynamic domestic market. And that's the case for Europe too. And that's going to be the case for other countries that rely mainly on exports to the United States. So again, this has we're living in pretty interesting times.
And Himanshu, a colleague of mine recently traveled to Romania, and he was looking for instances of subnational democracy. And these are models where cities work together in a direct democratic exchange of ideas. And he visited a peace village in Romania. But guess what? A fight had broken out in the peace village because the younger generation was moving towards the right, fueled by technology. And the older generation, who remembered and grew up in communist times, wanted a more moderate and a peaceful existence. So you've described yourself and you've made your career as an activist investor. Of course, that term means different, means something different as an activist investor versus, a climate activist or a democracy activist. But are there certain parts of a behavior of an activist that fuel you to put change out into the world, to as somebody whose brain functions like an activist investor? How do you want to see problems being solved? How do you want to see Indian diaspora making an impact?
Well, I think Indian diaspora has done quite well, as we heard, all day long here, and they truly have. So the question is, why do Indians do so much better outside India? We know all of our strengths. There are more and more CEOs, CFOs, top tier of Indian descent all across the globe, not just in the United States. So I think we should all be very proud of that. But the question is, why is India so behind? We talk about India greatness and whatnot, but there are still 600 million people that are still dirt poor. Ajay earlier talked about $500 billion that the Indian government spends on social programs. I really wonder where that money goes. Because frankly, I've seen a lot of villages that no one has gone in, whether it's in Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and the list goes on the states. So I think the question to the Indian government from Indian diaspora or any serious person that is interested in the well-being of India is that how do you channel that money better or well? So that's an activist position right there. And a lot of Indian companies also don't spend a lot of money on R&D, because the return expectations are higher. So how do you, CSR that Indian government implemented 10 years or so ago, that you have to commit 2%? every year. Why can't we do the same thing that Indian government, sets a law that 2% of your sales, any company over, let's say, $50 million equivalent rupees sales, they have to spend 2% on R&D. Immediately you start seeing more and more innovation. Innovation is taking place in India, but it's not enough for 1.4 billion people. And I think, so that's the activist position on the Indian government. And a fundamental question is, we all are gathered over here to really, not just to mingle and understand each other and work together with each other, but also, how do you help India to be a better country, faster?
So the Indian Constitution was adopted in 1950. And this year we celebrated our 75th Republic Day, 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Indian Constitution. The Indian Constitution is the longest written constitution of any democracy on the planet. It is 30 times longer than the Constitution of the United States. The theme of this year's Republic Day was Virasat aur Vikas, heritage and development. When you talk about if the current administration in the United States wants to make America great again, and how can Indians conceive of our own version of Indian greatness, how do you balance these two things, heritage and development?
I think some of the things I alluded earlier, but one thing I really want to talk about as part of this thing, the job skills, right? And why can't India set up 20 to 30,000 community colleges, or mainly for skill sets that you can, I'm not talking about carpentry work and HVAC work. I'm really talking about way beyond that. We heard about AI quite a bit, but AI cannot employ 20 million Indian youth that graduates every year. How do you give them jobs? And so I think you need that national level community college, or just a skill set approach, and really help the young Indians to be acceptable, that they can do things that the world wants or the Indian people want. Because India also imports quite a bit from China every year and other countries. And as part of being self-reliant, I think you can really source domestically at a cost that is palatable, to the consumers. So these are some of the things that I would do, to make India great again.
So I run Zocalo Public Square. It's a nonprofit newsroom based in Los Angeles, and we're owned by Arizona State University. The mission of Arizona State University is to count our success not by who we exclude, but by who we include, and the health of the communities we serve. One of the models that Arizona State is pursuing in India right now, picking up on your point about community colleges, is yes, we see a lack of community college level education, skill-based education in India. And so they've come up with a hybrid degree program, and they've partnered with universities like LPU, Chitkara, and Shivnadar to have enroll students for 2 years in India, and the final 2 years of their degree, they will go to Tempe or to Phoenix or even the Los Angeles campus to complete their degrees. So they're essentially doing it at a 50% discount to a full 4-year American degree, but they're graduating with an American degree with work permits and with visa certifications in order to go mostly into chip manufacturing, which is now booming in Arizona. So those kinds of models that are out there, and we're making inroads into India. What's your comment on that? And do you think that is at least one suitable model? And have you dreamt of any?
No, absolutely. I think there are going to be a lot of U.S. universities would love to help on that front. It's like you say, Arizona State University. Actually, I heard someone the same way. Some of the other universities. So, I think it's a partnership, like Australia, the same way, universities of Australia, or Canada and whatnot. I mean, it's kind of it can be an Indiaspora initiative actually. To really help the Indian government on that front. Not that, it's not happening, but my point over here, it should be happening at a warp speed, because we are getting behind in a lot of things, and this new administration and this new German government and things that what are happening in Canada and so forth and so on. So we cannot rely on all these countries for our, well-being. We have to become more and more self-reliant.
So my mother is in the audience, and she is a 60-year educator. She was telling me that even though she's 80 years old and retired, she still spends her time visiting schools and making sure that their curriculum at the elementary school level in India is at a pace so that it's building up to a very solid secondary school education base. And she was telling me right now she's involved in interviewing teachers at a school that she's helping in Gurugram, and they're having a problem with hiring elementary, kindergarten, and pre-kindergarten teachers. They just don't get it. These teachers want to just put on a video or immediately teach children the number system instead of actually teaching them to play games and to be creative. There is a gap in the supply of talented teachers. And in my opinion, both my parents are teachers. There's always been a huge and quite embarrassing pay differential in what teachers are paid. There is no incentive. Okay, there may be an incentive to be a professor or a high school teacher, but elementary school teachers in India, there is very little incentive. And even if we look deeper into a more play-based education, that's really not been adopted in India. But play-based education is what makes us creative and what gives us those innovative thinking skills. Tell me a little bit about how you were educated and how did you develop this activist mindset?
I went to school in Ahmedabad, and then I got my degree in Ohio, master's degree as well. I think education, I have, some of you may not agree with me, but, is what you learn every day, and especially in this AI world that we all are living in. I think colleges could be a dinosaur. So even the Ivy League schools, I mean, you can just punch things up on your AI model, and you get a lot of answers straight away. Your computer can be your tutor, and that has a tremendous implication, by the way, in a very positive way, especially in India and other countries where education levels are not as high as they need to be. But going back, I think, it's just like your curiosity, right? I think that, and that's why I think Indians outside India have done so well. It's just, Indian people are very curious. And, we are hardworking, and, we are adaptable. So, I was talking to someone 2 days ago in Dubai, and I didn't realize that, Indians are not the only one that are adaptable, because there are other countries that have also gone through quite turmoil. But going back to your point over here is, I think this, I think some of it is just you're born with it, I guess, and some of it, and a lot of it you learn as you go along.
One of the things that hits me very personally when I experience a lot of Indian culture living in the United States, attending forums, seeing how Indians are putting forward the culture and history of India into the world, to me, I would love to see a much more rounded and inclusive picture of India. I'm Catholic. I was born and raised Christian in India. Going back many generations, I'm actually Anglo-Indian. And so many people say to me, "You're not really Indian, are you?" No, I am actually really Indian. And when my husband and I took DNA tests, I actually have more Indian DNA than he does. So yes, Anglo-Indians are Indians. And wherever we go in the world, we do carry our culture with us. This is a little bit of a fun question I want to end with. And it's also a question I want everyone in the audience to think about as you go about the next few days of this conference. I got my start at MTV, and I was the first music programmer for MTV India. And at that time, we were told that we could only play Hindi music at certain hours of the day, but the majority of it had to be British and American pop. And that to me was an example of an American brand, an American entity that was fascinated by India, but actually knew very little about it. Himanshu, is there anything out there in the world, and everyone in the audience, you as well, is there something that absolutely fascinates you, but you wish you knew more about?
That's a tough question because there are so many things that there's this project that now it's not music or anything like that. It is business related, but one of the projects that I'm involved with is really kind of, how do you live longer and happier, or healthier, I should say. Happy comes from giving, as we discussed quite a bit. And I think, we all know good food, daily exercise, meditation, yoga, but there's another last element is, hormones. And there is so little knowledge of hormones in the world today and how critical a role it plays in the well-being of a human body. So that's something that, it's a societal, because there's not that much money in that, and that's why a lot of pharmaceutical companies really have not invested or looked into it deeply, because hormones are anti-inflammatory. See, any disease that we have is related to inflammation. So, we take turmeric. Why? Because it's anti-inflammatory. But there is no money in turmeric. It's the same way with hormones at large. So that's something, but you can have a lot better quality of life if your hormones are in check, or if you have adequate hormones in your body. So that's something for the society at large, for living a healthier life, a better quality of life. That excites me.
Well, as a menopausal woman, I will tell you that hormones are very important. And by the power vested in me, which is nothing, if I were to have it my way, I would award you the best dressed at this conference. Thank you so much.